Okay, well, today I considered just live streaming, but I decided to record this video just because I have a fair amount to cover and I didn't really want to get distracted with the chat, and the stuff that goes on YouTube when you're live streaming. I really wanted to keep my focus because here's the deal. The last couple days, what I've done is I've been going back to the beginning of the project, to the first minute of animation that was completed a long time ago, and taking everything I've learned in the last, 3 to 6 months, and saying, hey, what can we improve? What can we go back and make better? And so it led me to this initial shot. It's actually funny because I couldn't find the OpenTunes scene that represented this, and turns out I had just done a quick and dirty animation job in Sony Vegas, but I didn't really feel like it was kind of where it needed to be. And in the process of trying to improve things, I bumped into a lot of roadblocks. So let me just show the current state of this shot. Let's see. Let me make sure the preview area is where it needs to be. What I'm gonna talk about tonight is real world problem solving, and part of it's going to be within the context of this anime project, and then part of it's going to be another project that came up and sort of bit me out of the blue, and which I'm sure you will find interesting if you hang in with me for the, let's say, I'm going to try to keep this to under 10 minutes. I'll try. Okay, so the first thing about this scene was that it actually consisted of a multi-layer file here in Krita, which that one is not yet. Let me actually, it looks like I have 2 instances of Krita open, so let me close that one. Okay, so you had this, and let me just turn these layers off so you can see you had the background of the sky, then the mountains, and then I did some hand painting on top of the mountains. Then you had the foreground, the monastery, and then some beams coming in from the sky, from the moon ostensibly. Okay, so the basic problem I ran into is that when I exported this from Krita as a Photoshop file, PSD file, what I discovered is that OpenTunes will not import a PSD file cleanly. If you drag and drop one into OpenTunes, it'll ask you if you want to spread the layers of the Photoshop file over the columns, or do you want to treat it as a sequence. Neither one work. What happens is, what actually comes into OpenTunes for me in this case was 5 layers that were all this same level, and I jumped through a bunch of hoops and spent a bunch of time with it, and ultimately determined that I love Krita for background painting, but as far as dealing with multi-layer files, it's not happening. Now you could save it as an ORA, which is my paints format. An ORA file is in fact under the hood nothing more than a zip file, and within the zip file there's a folder with a bunch of pings, and the pings represent each of the layers of your image, and then there's some metadata to tell whatever program's opening the Aura file, such as MyPaint, about things like, I would suppose, the blending modes and that sort of thing. Well, the problem with that is you would always have to unpack the Aura because the ORA file is not native to OpenTunes. Okay, so I tried a number of things. Nothing really worked. And even actually, unfortunately, it turns out Krita has this little doohickey here called export layers. So I exported all the layers as individual ping files and lo and behold, that didn't work either. There was something about the export from Krita that caused OpenToonz to choke on the pings, which is really weird because, well, I guess the background painting that I've been doing in Krita has mostly been TIFF files, which is kind of the native. That's the native flavor of bitmap image that OpenToonz really wants. And the way I normally do that is I'll start painting in OpenToonz, and that way the background images, or well, the images that I'm painting in OpenToonz then appear in the folder, which I can show here. Your OpenToonz project. I got to close a couple other things I was working on, but your OpenToonz stuff folder will have your tunes folder will have a folder that represents the entire project that you're working on, and under that is all these subfolders. Well, the extras folder is where the regular raster images from any project are covered, so are saved. So if I go to the battle back half, which is what I've been working on lately, you can see I have all these TIFF files, and these TIFF files represent the background paintings that I did for that scene. Okay, so I can open these in Krita and work on them and save them out, and they come back into OpenToonz just fine. Pings from Krita, I would have to test it more extensively to be sure exactly what all's going on, but basically I'm not really trusting pings exported from Krita at this point. If you want to play it safe with OpenToonz, use TIFF files. It's about that simple. Okay, so what I did was I went ahead and said, you know what, I'm just going to break this up into levels in OpenToonz, and hopefully you won't mind the fact that the preview is going to be a little smaller here, because I want to be able to show all these different levels and just show what I did. So this was really it was a pretty challenging process, because it's one of those days where every step I took, I felt like I was having to take 2 steps back. No big deal. So I brought these individual images into OpenToonz. In the case of the mountains, I just said forget it, and I hand painted it. And frankly, it probably looks better than what I had before anyway. Okay, so then just to show what I did here, I then added a layer of mist at the tops of the mountains. Then you got the monastery. I did do some work in Krita vignetting it a little bit, and I'm going to skip these levels. Now there's a level here that is strictly for providing a tint on the scene, and I do that as a Toonz raster level specifically so that I can just color the whole frame one color. As you can see, that's what it is, and then I can actually adjust the color or the opacity of that palette entry, and so it's a good way to do some basic color correction on a scene. Okay, so then I added the moon. I added some moonbeams. These levels here were strictly used for animation because I wanted to animate the push in towards the monastery at a little different pace than the mountains. So if we look at the OpenToonz schematic, not the effects schematic, but the stage schematic, you can see that there's the mountain animation. This level is driving the animation for the mountains, and then this level is driving the animation for the monastery. Okay. Okay, so having done that, I also wanted to add a little bit of smoke, and it's hard to see. Can you see that? Okay. What I did was I just basically scribbled a bunch of smoke. If I show you the image, you can't really see it because it's all white. But then what I did was I animated it to push in a little bit and to pan a little bit, so that as you're coming into this scene, and by the way, we don't want this big honkin' brush like get in the way. So as you're going into the scene, you get a little faint. You can't even see it actually here. It looks pretty good when it renders. So I'll go ahead and just bring this down here, and you'll be able to see it better. But if you look real close, you can see it right here. You can just see a little bit of a smoky mist that's kind of panning over the scene, which I think it's just a subtle touch that adds a lot of quality. Okay, so now you're wondering, what about the birds? What the heck is that about? Well, and that's just to create some mood in the scene. What I did was I happened to have this image sequence that I created quite some time ago. Okay, I guess here you have to hit what? There we go. So I just hand animated this picture, this sequence of a bird flapping its wings, and then simply use the animate tool. As you can see, these little keyframes like here and here. So let's go out here, and you can see that what I did was I turned these on, by the way, so you can see them. I just set an initial position for them. For this one, I set his start point a little bit later. Here, so in other words, I set his initial start point and then just copied that keyframe so that he doesn't move at all. This one, I did a rotation actually in mid-flight because he looked like he was going to barrel down into the ground or something. And then I deliberately made it so that the second bird, which is a little smaller on the screen, actually crosses to the other side a little faster. As you can see, he's sort of catching up with the other one. And then the last thing I did was add the big one that's in the front. And I figured if he was actually passing in front of the camera, he'd zip by faster than the other two. So if we go ahead and look at the final rendering of it, this is what we get. So, now I need to write some music to bring this in, and so now the question is, what's next? Okay, there's a couple shots in the original version of this that we cut to that shows Akari in her room sleeping, yada yada yada. And what I really want is a second image or a second shot it's going to dissolve to, that's closer to the monastery, where you can see Akari in the window. And my 12 minutes is up, so obviously I'm not going to get it under 12 minutes. But okay, so I won't get into the problems associated with that second scene, but what I think I'm going to do is take this initial scene, which is this one, okay, and let's go ahead and save all on that scene because I'm pretty happy with how that's turning out. Okay, so now what we see here is we've got Akari sleeping, and then we got this wider shot, and then in the last couple days I've gone into this scene. I mean, this shot has changed completely, and I don't remember if I went over this on YouTube at all, but the background painting is completely new. I redid the shadow work on these ninjas. All in all, just everything looks a lot better. So that's feeling pretty good. Also did change the background image here. Put a shadow, or I actually fixed the background image here. Put a shadow under the rock, so the rock that's falling, you can see it has a shadow. And that was actually an interesting learning experience, because I realized that basically the shadow, if the rock was falling, the shadow wouldn't really get bigger, because as the rock gets away from you, the shadow gets smaller. Wait, I mean the rock gets smaller as it moves away from you in space. So therefore, it occurred to me that probably the actual cast shadow would be about the same size. Now I think if this was a photography, from up here the shadow would be a lot more blurred out, and it would probably not be as dense looking. And for an anime, I don't think we need to do that. But yeah, so I put that shadow in there, and let's see what else we did. There's been quite a few tweaks here. Okay, this was cleaned up slightly, and I added a vignette. So previously this darker area up here and down here did not exist, but I've been finding that some judicious use of vignettes really up the quality, and you see the same thing here. I changed the background image, and I also gave him a little bit of a vignette because, you know, it's dark, and I'm just trying to use some compositional sense to sort of guide the viewer's eyes a little bit better. This one, this shot clearly still has some problems. I replaced the background image and then failed to have the settings correct so that when it renders it's actually showing the old one. So apparently I never deleted the old one. And I think this one requires some hand painting too, because I had to turn it in Z space, which kind of stretched things out and made it look, it looks flatter than it needs to. It needs a little bit better bump mapping, if you will, really. So anyway, what I'm thinking I can do is on my second shot, I'm probably going to use this, because if I turn off the camera cropping, you can see this is I mean, I actually, what I need to do, okay, so this is again an example of how you sort of solve problems. Let me just think this through for a minute. What I think really needs to happen here is delete those, and that leaves only this, and then I'm gonna go ahead and explode this sub X sheet. Okay, so now we have this shot brought into the main X sheet. Believe me, I want to save it immediately under a new name. Save this scene as, and this is basically the fourth shot. Well, yeah, this is the fourth shot. So I'm going to call this, just because I'm sort of adopting a convention here, I'm going to call it 004. And let me just make sure, yes, 004 Akari sleeping wide shot ninjas climb wall. Okay, it just doesn't hurt to be exhaustive with your naming conventions. Well, the reason for that is I'm now going to save the scene under a different name. And I'm going to call this one Akari sleeping wide shot, because this is actually the second shot in the movie. Okay. So for this shot, these guys are not needed. So delete that, delete that, delete that, delete that, delete that. Okay. So now what we probably have here is, I imagine, let me just drag this keyframe down and see what happens. Okay, yeah, it's still the same. So what I need to figure out right now is where the animation's coming from. So let's look at the schematic. And this is the stage schematic. Now, because I deleted a bunch of stuff and brought it in from a sub X sheet, it's a bit of a mess, as you can see. OpenToonz does not do a good job of housekeeping. If you have images or levels or whatever in a scene and then delete them, it's really common that the actual data does not get deleted from the Toonz file. It's not exactly tragic, but it is a bit of a pain. Okay, so now what I have to do is figure out what to throw away and what to keep. It could be that this is driving some animation, but frankly, I want to get rid of all animation in this scene. So I'm just going to get rid of all those peg bars. And it looks like we still have the camera move, which could mean that I might have actually animated the camera. So that means, let me see. Let's go to Windows, and it is going to be the function editor. Okay, and looks like column 1. I don't see. So I can't fix this shot until I know where the animation is coming from, and it doesn't look like it's coming from the camera. Okay, what if we turn this off? Okay, I'm gonna just delete it. Okay, and this says, oh well, duh, this says keep. This is it right here. I'll bet ya. Okay, so let's save all. I'll bet ya this. Yep, there we go. There's our culprit. I just want to make sure nothing else gets boogered up. Very good. Okay. Now the question is this? Nope. Okay, so what I want to do now is reorganize. Okay, this level does not appear to have any visual use. However, everything's feeding through it, so we'll just keep it in there and use the animate tool right here. So let's change our scale. Basically, we want to go like this and just go like that. Okay. And I'm just going to go basically as wide as I can and still get the extents of the drawing in there. Okay. Okay. I'm thinking this shot really wants to be at least 4 to 5 seconds long. So 5 would be 120. So I'm actually going to go to 134. Let's go to 144. Okay. And I'm just going to go something like that. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. We don't want to have to render the whole thing, so. Okay. So that shot is basically done. I'm going to say that's a nice. I may go ahead and add some moonbeams. Let's just do that. Let's add some moonbeams. I feel like I want to see a little bit more moonbeam action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my trusty airbrush right there and make it white and also make it big. Okay. Control Z. Okay. And now I can just dial that in to whatever degree I want, and I'm thinking that it's there. I can use it or not use it. And let's see here. Why don't we go ahead and add a couple more aggressive beams, but really turn the size down. Okay. Yeah, that way. It's got a little more variety in there. And that will be offset ultimately by the tint, which I'm going to add right now. So this is going to be the tint, and the tint is going to be whatever the heck we want it to be. So let's just make it black, because, and so actually for that I'm going to take this extremely bold brush called bulk, make it as big as possible, and just go like that. Okay. Why did I do that? Well, because again, we can always modify the alpha for that level anytime we want to. So it's probably going to look something like that, and now you can see better why those beams are kind of useful. And by the way, you can put your mouse over these and then roll your mouse wheel to just dial that in. Okay. File, save all. Okay, so now what I'm curious about, this could be an ugly moment. Did OpenTunes somehow screw up the other shots because of saving my work on this shot? Let's find out. I'm kind of prepared for that, and that's why I'm kind of living dangerously here. But it looks like this is all perfectly fine. So what did I accomplish? Well, what I actually just did was added a whole new shot to the show, which I had wanted from day one. I had wanted a medium close, well, I should say, that's a stupid thing to call it, a medium wide shot. So that we got the really wide shot of the monastery, then the close up, and then it will cut to this shot. Cool. So we're in good shape. Alright, so that's 27. Man, I tell you, I'm going to have to start bookmarking these videos so people can jump around in them. So anyway, so here's what happened. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop this video and start another one, because there's an interesting project that came up. Again, very instructional as far as using OpenTunes, that came up for a friend of mine who happens to be one of the top 5 and arguably the top #1 best long distance shooter in the history of the world. He just made a shot the other day that was like 3,600 yards, like well over 2 miles. Hit a target. I believe it's a properly documented shot, sanctioned, yada yada yada. But he's on the the shooting team that routinely competes all over the world. And he was a sniper in the Marines. And anyway, so I'll kill this video and start another one and show you a completely different project separate from this anime that was definitely a challenge and quite educational.